Wait, don't click off the video. Yeah, I know it's late. I'll talk about that in a little bit. I just want to say I'm sorry it's so late, but I hope you enjoy the video anyway. You know what? Here's my excuse. Ads are terrible in January. There you go. Enjoy the video. By the way, I read every comment I get, so any advice or criticism you guys have is really helpful. Last episode, a few people commented about how there was too much ear rape, and I did remove a few of those in the YouTube editor, which is so much fun to work with.
What kind of place is this?
But from this point on, ear rape will be used only on extremely rare occasions. Starting now. Before we get into the game itself, I thought it'd be pretty fun to go over the short history this game has, as I find it pretty interesting. For some reason, I've always kind of felt a little weird about it. And no, it's not because besides Sonic Mania, we haven't had a good mainline Sonic game in years. It's just that ever since the very first trailer for this game, I've always kind of felt nostalgic for it. At first glance, I didn't really understand why, but taking a step back and looking at everything we had, I think I got it. See, Sonic Frontiers is taking a much more serious approach, focusing much more on the lore and everything that they're adding in, which hasn't been done in a very long time. If you've been a Sonic fan for just the past 10 years, all you know is sitcom funny haha. That's about all you got. Especially with the release of Sonic Colors Ultimate.
Baldy nose hair!
But if you were a Sonic fan long before that, you know that they were extremely serious about their stories. The very last supposed Dark Age game was Sonic and Black Knight, and that took everything extreme, even the stupid talking sword.
Fool!
So, I think you get where I'm going with this. I mean, that first trailer was intense, especially when the lights are all dim and Sonic almost gets Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. To me personally, it felt like the Sonic Dark Ages were back, and yet, I wasn't worried. I've seen a few people say that they were worried that this game would revive the Dark Ages and, you know, bring a whole nother slew of bad games. But I haven't really seen anybody compare this to a Dark Age game. I mean, they didn't really have anything to go off of, because again, the game wasn't even out yet. But still, I don't know, it just gave me that feeling. But it wasn't a bad feeling. It was more a feeling of, wow, they're taking their story seriously again. There's real stakes here. I feel like this is gonna be interesting. I especially got Unleashed vibes from it. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it was from all the animated stuff we got, who can really tell. But either way, I was pretty optimistic. And I'm sure a large part of that was all the leaks we got. So let's see what's going on with those. It's time for the one random time I'll be pretending that this is a game show while going over the history of Frontiers leaks. Woo! So we've known Frontiers was coming for a few years now, but how much did we really know? Well, quite a shocking amount actually. Starting with the first Frontiers leak all the way back in 2018, right after Forces. Yikes. Bro, you know they had a dud on their hands. Anyway, back in August of 2018, an anonymous forum user detailed a consumer test they did, saying,
"They're making an open-world Sonic game where the objective is to destroy skyscraper-sized enemies. The game is going to be called Sonic Colossus or Sonic Titans." Hey, Peter.
Thankfully, those names didn't stick, as if it was called Sonic Titans, I would most likely only accept enemies with big goofy faces doing awkward baby waddles. But see what I'm saying? As early as 2018, we knew what the main enemies were like. That seems like a pretty big problem for a major game company. But, what do I know? I just talk about garbage on YouTube. Back to leaks. We didn't get another one until over a year later, November of 2019. Another anonymous forum user decided to post about an opportunity they had to take a survey for upcoming game ideas. They said that one game was Super Mario Odyssey 2, which is a statement that has aged like milk, and the other was, quote, a new Sonic game set in the Starfall Islands. They confirmed that it's on the Switch, which is something I think most people expected, but then proceed to say they had 38 pictures. What? We were given only 2 of those pictures, but those 2 alone give some major detail, including giant enemies, the location of the game, and even going supersonic during boss fights. This did seem like a stretch, but clearly it was real, so... Sega, you might need some flex tape because you have sprung quite the leak here.
Damage!
Also, while not being the full picture, they do show off a picture of a highly detailed Sonic model here. I kinda wanna know what that would look like in game. Just kind of a random shower thought I had. Next, April 2020. In yet another random Sonic thread, another random forum user talked about playtesting a new game back in February of that same year. There wasn't really any new info other than them saying it was disappointing and nothing to be excited about. Congrats on the launch, it's better than nothing. The only helpful stuff they gave was that it's open world,
No, it is open zones.
you fight a giant as Supersonic, and a new piece of info, Infinite's theme plays during the boss fight. This was clearly not in the final product. If that music really were there, it was most likely a placeholder for the time being. I mean, I love Infinite's theme and all, I literally just used it in the last episode, but I'd much rather have what we got in the release than reusing a song that we literally just had in the last game. We've had enough of reusing assets, I don't need more. We'll get to it later, one step at a time. After this leak, it was a lot of the same stuff. People talking about open world areas, fans being toxic, and false info being mixed in with the real leaks. Just the regular garbage. The only interesting things I found in this time span were that it was first called Sonic Rangers as of July 2020, and in January of 2021 we learned of Sonic's new cool ability called the Spin Cycle. And you all thought Psyloop was bad. Now, Sonic Rangers was something that fans latched onto for a good while. Go look at all the leak videos with Sonic Rangers in the title, because it feels almost... We thought this was the final name, so we latched onto it. I mean, loads of people corroborated it with official documents, so what else could we call it? Even sites like The Gamer and Polygon jumped on using this name. We thought we'd nailed it, but Rangers was either a placeholder name, or Sonic Team changed it to fit the tone of the game better. Because in October of 2021, in a Lucid survey, this question was asked. What would you expect from a Sonic the Hedgehog game titled Sonic Frontiers? Of course this image blew up, which caused almost all fans to transfer to calling it Frontiers. This was only proven when a Japanese Twitter user posted what seemed to be a large document with info I'm too non-weeb to understand. But basically, it was saying that Sonic Frontiers had been trademarked by Sega, which meant that it was now the official new name. Finally, on December 9th, 2021, we were given our last major leak in a Polygon article. It's just a quick synopsis, something that you'd find somewhere like IGN, but it was still some big stuff. Who's Sage? What unintended consequences? Why does Sonic have a time limit? Big stuff. Now, you could argue that there were more big leaks to cover, but seeing how close those got to release, I'd consider those more spoilers than anything. So those just got thrown in the bin for me. I wasn't letting this game get spoiled for me. Not after waiting this long. Twitter tried, Reddit tried, even YouTube tried. While editing this video to get a song, I almost got spoiled the last cutscene. That is not good. I didn't even look at the thumbnail. As soon as I saw the title, I scrolled right the heck back up. This is why you need to be extremely careful when searching things, people. Anyway, thanks to Soa City for compiling these leaks. It was extremely helpful. So, those are the main leaks. So why did they make me feel weird about this title? Well, besides the vibes I talked about before, one of these leaks flat out said, quote, "It felt like they were going back to 06, but mixed with Breath of the Wild." Even if people got these dark, worrying feelings about this game, I'm a gosh dang Sonic fan, okay? Of course I saw the warning signs, we see them earlier than others, but I still had to cling on to that stupid hope that they crammed down my throat when I first saw this blue fuzz pig. If I'd learned anything, the Sonic cycle was almost inevitable. But, if you've seen other videos, if you read reviews, if you saw the thumbnail or played this game, then you'd know that they broke the Sonic cycle. Hey, maybe it was thanks to his new move called the Spin Cycle. No, I'm done. I'm not even gonna finish that. Bottom line, most people are eating this game up. Even IGN supported this game and gave it a pretty positive review. Side note, there was a pretty funny incident on IGN's YouTube channel. Basically, they have a sideshow where they'll talk about big titles coming out that next month. Of course, for November, Sonic was on the list. Well, instead of giving a quick synopsis or witty joke like they usually would, this man, I think this tweet said it best. IGN chose smoke.
Did you hear that? That's the sound of thousands of hardcore Sonic fans cracking their knuckles and getting ready to leave angry comments on IGN videos because Sonic Frontiers is coming out for everything on the 8th, and I'm sure we'll do something to piss them off. Or maybe they're still mad because somebody spoke ill of Sonic on an IGN podcast 7 years ago. Or maybe they haven't gotten over the low review score that Sonic Adventure got 23 years ago.
I think most people thought this was pretty funny. And I mean, come on, Sonic fans. We deserve every part of that. I'm sure some people were actually offended because of course they were. But I legitimately sat back, laughed, and said, yeah, we had that coming. I really wasn't mad about their old clip. More than anything, I just wanted to show that people still think that way. But it's a pretty old clip, so they deserve every bit of this victory. So with all that out of the way, and all the hype and excitement pushing this game forward, let's take a look at this brand spanking new title, starting with the story. But first... Yeah, so as part of the hype for this game, they released
two
prequel stories. One was a comic, and the other was a 6-minute animated short led once again by Tyson Hess. The animation is no doubt the star here, but for the sake of story, let's dive in starting with the prequel comic. And there you go. Just kidding. Of course it's cool. But in all honesty, you just don't need it. Everything in that comic is explained in the game we're about to talk about, so why waste my breath? I love the art and quick references to Adventure 1, but really, we just didn't need it. Still, it hyped up the game, and I'm all for it, so you won't see me complaining. Moving on, while I found the comic to be a nice bonus, but not really needed, the Knuckles story was 100% required. Maybe not the short itself, but the story for sure. Sonic Team's been throwing the spiky-handed freak in whatever random game they wanted, disregarding any prior duties he may have had. But because of something I'll talk about in a bit, they felt like they couldn't do that for Frontiers. So let's see why Knuckles is even here. Like the comic, the short is pretty straight to the point, but I do not care. I love it to death. Basically, Knuckles stands guarding the Master Emerald and begins questioning his duties before going off to explore the island. Soon he stumbles across a Knight's Chow struggling to get something out from a bunch of rocks. Helping it, Knuckles discovers a gear and an entrance to this thing again. So Knuckles gets sucked through and has a fight that's better than anything Sonic X had. And yes, even Dark Sonic, I will die on this hill. Also, I'm pretty sure there's a Fleetway reference. I refuse to believe they didn't realize this, and I'm glad other people noticed. After this, a mysterious girl shows up and tells Knuckles that it clearly doesn't own an air fryer, before trapping him and setting him up for the game. Again, this is such a good short. My only problem is, it's not in the game. Yes, it's canonically what happened, but you actively have to look for it if you want to know why he's here. Sure, he'll tell you he was exploring and just wound up here, but couldn't they have found a way to put that in the game? That feels like it wouldn't be that hard to do. Maybe they were too far into development, I don't know. I can excuse the comic, as honestly we don't even need it, but this would be nice to have in the game, especially for those that aren't massive Sonic fans and want to hop into something new. As for the main story of the game, it can be summarized in a surprisingly quick way. Yeah, so I got a pretty funny story. Actually, it was the exact opposite of funny. I was pretty stressed out. Literally, while in the middle of editing the story section of this video, my computer just didn't. It just wanted to stop existing. And I guess it thought the best way to do that was to delete Windows off of itself. That was awesome. I still don't know how this happened, and neither does the computer guy that fixed it. But hey, it got fixed, so I'm back, I guess. There is a major downside to this though. I was doing pretty well while editing. I was pretty far in. And so a lot of work that I had got deleted. And you might think to yourself, well, why don't you just go into the Adobe Creative Cloud and download the file again? Well, I would, and I tried, but Adobe said no. The file doesn't exist, which is really weird because I backed it up. But yeah, the file's gone. It's just gone. Thankfully, my game footage that I had saved on another drive on my computer is completely untouched, along with all the episode sections that I had done. I backed those up like immediately after I exported them, so they're all good too. But in a way, I feel like this kind of comes as a blessing in disguise, if you can call your PC dying on itself a blessing. See, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that a lot of videos about Sonic Frontiers are gonna be pretty much exactly the same. The person will go through the game and talk about the same different things, albeit story, gameplay, all of it, and give their, while interesting, admittedly very similar takes on it. And I mean, this video is gonna be pretty late, like over a month late. So I might as well try and make this something special. I say special, but what I had in mind really isn't all that great. Just hear me out. Oh yeah, spoilers, I guess. So, I think we can all agree that the actual main story of this game is not the best. It's not horrible at all. I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form. But it really doesn't feel like the epic story I think they wanted to go for. I mean, I don't 100% know Ian Flynn's intentions with the story, but I didn't get an epic vibe from it. I actually hate that word.
Epic!
Were there awesome moments? Of course there were. Where do you think all those great screenshots have been coming from? But the story just didn't hit that Lord of the Rings epic mark that I think it was trying to aim for. Let me explain what I mean. The game opens the way I think most people expected it to, and honestly, this is how I would want it to open. Eggman goes and finds a bunch of robot things or whatever, he activates this ancient portal thing, and then he gets sucked in. During all that, Sonic, Tails, and Amy are flying on the Tornado on their way to the Starfall Islands to find out why the Chaos Emeralds are suddenly gathering there. Also, if you read the prequel comic, you'd know that they already know that Eggman is on the islands, so there's that. And I think that this setup is probably the best that we could have asked for. I mean, yeah, the way I just described it, it sounds pretty simple. But in a way, I think that's how Sonic stories should be told. We don't need a super complex story, handing out loads of lore trying to get everybody invested. I mean, that's exactly what 06 did, and look what happened. Time travel screwing everything up, romantic subplots, why the heck is Shadow working for Gun? I mean, that's just a small amount of things I could come up with off the top of my head. I'm not saying I want Sonic stories to be overly simple. I would love a good amount of lore, and I mean, this game delivered. I'll get to that in a second, but what I'm trying to say is, I think that this game struck a good balance. It was pretty serious for most of the runtime, but at the same time, it wasn't taking itself way too seriously. There were still a handful of fourth wall breaks, funny little jokes, and nice Easter eggs, but they still took themselves seriously, and I really appreciate that. And that's not the first time I felt this way. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this game was giving me strong Unleashed vibes, and that surprisingly stayed throughout a lot of the gameplay. But I mean, clearly this game isn't like Unleashed, so why? Well, it comes down to the story, and in terms of storytelling, I think they nailed it. It's not a perfect story, don't get that impression by any means. I did have a few parts where I questioned some decisions.
Submit. Your reckless actions endanger the world.
Care to explain how saving my friends is a bad thing?
You are an enemy combatant. I will not share data with you.
You what?
But for the most part, I was really on board. So now, since we know that the reason I felt that way was because of the story, I thought it'd be kind of fun to just go through and draw some parallels between Unleashed and Sonic Frontiers. So let's start off with the beginning of the stories. Both games see Sonic in pretty average situations that he's usually in. For Sonic Unleashed, yeah, he's in space, so that's kinda cool. But other than that, it's a pretty average day of destroying Eggman's stuff. I mean, besides the fact that we get the best 3D cutscene of any Sonic game, yeah, this is pretty normal. And how about Sonic Frontiers? Well, Tails, Sonic, and Amy are just on their way to the islands to see why the Chaos Emeralds are even there. Again, pretty normal. They look for the Chaos Emeralds pretty often, even if it's just to check up on their whereabouts, so I don't see a big thing here. Sonic is just having an average day. Nothing too exciting, pretty straightforward, and honestly normal. And that will lead into something that I talk about later, mostly about how I feel about this game's story. But for the time being, let's continue on with more comparisons. It's during these normal days for Sonic that these crazy twists come in. For Unleashed, Eggman pulls out this machine that sucks out all the Chaos Emeralds and turns him into a furry, if he wasn't already one. I don't know where the fan base stands on this. Is Sonic a furry or not? I don't get it. But either way, yeah, that's setting up Sonic for the whole game. There we go. And then for Sonic Frontiers, out of nowhere, Sonic, Amy, and Tails are sucked into this portal, and then Sonic is spat back out with a disembodied voice telling him to go do a bunch of errands. Again, not something very typical. Well, actually, I mean, maybe it is typical, I don't know. This isn't the first time Sonic's been sucked into an alternate world against his will. Next off for Sonic Unleashed, it's after this that we meet Chip, this game's new character, and Sonic's new sidekick. Chip seems insignificant at first, but it turns out that he's actually like the biggest plot point of this game. And for Sonic Frontiers, it turns out that Sage is the same thing. Both of these characters have some level of plot significance, and both characters in the end up defeating the final boss. Sonic is just kind of like an accessory to their victory. I mean, yeah, Sonic did get the final hit on both of them, but at the same time, Chip is the one that damaged Dark Gaia enough to where Sonic could do that, and for the end, Sonic wouldn't have been able to reach that speed without Sage throwing him. So I don't know, I mean, yeah, Sonic was definitely useful there, but nah, the heavy lifting was definitely Chip or Sage. Oh yeah, kinda just completely forgot the main enemies of the story. Both of these games have insanely dark monsters that you have to fight. I mean, for Sonic Unleashed, it's a literal dark monster, with a bunch of dark minions you have to run around and fight, both in level and outside of the levels. And then for Sonic Frontiers, they're all robots, but I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. For the little enemies, it's just kinda like mini versions of the big bosses. So yeah, I'd say those are pretty similar too. And both games have the big mega boss. Sonic Frontiers has the end, and Sonic Unleashed has Dark Gaia, whom they actually reference in a conversation in the game. That's just another thing to get to, though. I'll talk about that type of stuff in a little bit. Then there's the lore building aspect of it. Both Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Frontiers throw loads of lore in here that we did not have prior to this. I mean, we had suspicions, and there has been slight glimmers of this stuff before, but nah, Sonic Frontiers blew it out of the water. Not quite like Unleashed did, but in a similar way. For Sonic Unleashed, we learned that Dark Gaia has been around for years before Sonic. Like, how old is Sonic again? Oh yeah, no, Dark Gaia was around before. But yeah, Dark Gaia and Chip have been fighting this battle for years. Again, it's not much lore from Unleashed, but I mean, knowing that's been going on Mobius or wherever they are for that long, that's pretty crazy. And what did Frontiers add? Well, now we know that the Chaos Emeralds are literal Infinity Stones, so that's pretty crazy. Again, we had suspicions of something like that before, but yeah, that's pretty cool. Also, we learned that they came there because a race called the Ancients. Why did you use that name? Had them previous to being on Sonic's world, and used them as some sort of energy source, powering their machines and technology. The only reason the emeralds ended up on Sonic's world was because the giant end creature that you have to fight at the end of the game chased them off, and then the Master Emerald drew them back to Sonic's world, meaning the Master Emerald was already on Sonic's world. How did the Master Emerald get there? I don't know. It showed up there somehow. But yeah, in a way, both of these games gave Sonic lore a bit of a boost. Also, I'm gonna throw in a quick side note here. I'll put up a picture of the tweet if I can find it again, but somebody had a really cool theory that the Ancients knew about Dark Gaia and made the Gaia temples as some sort of precaution just in case he was able to escape again. Hey, that's something really cool. If Sega wants to snag that up, I mean, I think that's fair game, as long as the guy that created the theory is cool with it. I mean, he probably is, I don't know. So, story-wise, I'm sure there are more comparisons I could make, but my brain's a little fried at the moment. So there's only one major one that I can think of, and that would be how characters are written. I'm just gonna say it now, I don't think that you can compare the character writing in Sonic Unleashed and Frontiers. One of them did it incredibly well, and the other one I feel was just more good, but not quite on the same level of good. And I think you guys know which one is which. Sonic Unleashed had phenomenal character writing, but I'm not gonna say it's the best. Still though, I mean, this stuff was good. Sonic and Chip actually felt like they created a bond, and it felt really cool to watch that throughout the game. And even in the side shorts that they made to promote the game. Watching them just have friendly banter is so much fun. And even during heartfelt moments like where Chip tries to leave to take out Dark Gaia by himself, Sonic stops him and actually shows how good of a friend he is, even though they literally just met. Those types of moments are so nice, and I'm so glad Sonic Unleashed had writing like this. It just affirms in my mind how good of a game this was, even if people at the time didn't see it. I'm not saying it's a perfect game, and you'll never hear me say that, but still, this just solidates in my mind even more how much I love Sonic Unleashed. And that's why I'm so glad that Sonic Frontiers reminded me of that, because the writing in Sonic Frontiers, at least for the characters and the interactions they have, is
absolutely phenomenal.
It has been so long since Sonic fans have eaten this good. The character writing was just, I don't have the words, it was just amazing. I think most people can agree that the best writing of all was Sonic and Knuckles. Their chemistry was just, it was perfect. I mean, I love Sonic Movie 2, but I don't even think that got it quite as good as this. And I mean, that's not anybody's fault, but I mean, we know why the writing was this good. We know who wrote the characters in this game, and he knew what he was doing. He's worked with these characters for so long now, and it feels so good to see that come out on a big screen. What more can I say? The character writing was perfect. Sonic and Knuckles having friendly banter, Sonic and Tails feeling like real caring brothers that are actually trying to help each other, and yet can still joke around, Sonic and Amy not feeling like a couple. I'm definitely not gonna say that, but it does feel like they have some sort of chemistry going, and that feels nice. I do like that. And even smaller things like seeing Sonic and Eggman show their rivalry, just through things like eye contact. That just hit me right. I just liked that so much. And even one that I think is kind of controversial in terms of storytelling, but that being the relationship between Sage and Eggman. I'm just gonna say it, I don't care if people don't like it. I love how this relationship turned out, and I think it'll go really far in future games. I mean, that's if they keep the writing this good. But even if you have to search through character dialogue and voice lines that aren't included in the actual game, like the Eggman memos were kind of stupid. They should have just had those able to be be actual dialogue in the game, instead of having to be something you win in a fishing minigame. I'm just gonna say that straight up. But seeing Eggman and Sage slowly become closer together, up until Sage's sacrifice in the end, and seeing Eggman actually sad, and then being super happy when he actually brings her back, that's just nice. I like that. I mean, in modern games, how many times can you say that you saw Eggman show genuine sadness or anger? That does not count. Whoa! And comics do not count either. I mean mainline games. How many times have we seen Eggman not showing that stupid smile or stupid angry face? I mean genuine sadness or anger. How many times have you heard him break out of that stupid voice to sound genuinely mad or sad? I'm telling you, this could be a series first. Unless somebody can point out one to me, I think this could be a big step. Mike Pollock, I'm just gonna say it, bravo. All in all, character writing in this game was phenomenal. All of the interactions, all of the character responses, it was just perfect, especially on Sonic. He was serious, he was sassy, he was funny, he was written perfectly. I don't know what else to say. All characters in this game are good. There we go. That's all I can say. And all in all, yeah, that's basically all I gotta say about the story. Like I said, I'm going into this thinking that everybody watching this has already gotten a pretty good idea what the story is about. I'm not expecting anybody to wait for my video to drop just to figure out what the plot of a new Sonic game is, especially when there's so many other people out there making videos like this. So I thought I'd just give some general critiques and, offer some nice comparisons that you might not have heard yet. As for the writing in general, there are definitely more critiques that I could give. One that I saw thrown around a lot was all the references that they make. I mean, literally just in general conversation, you can hear names like Dark Gaia and Styx the Badger just be thrown around out of nowhere. Some people thought these references were out of place and happened way too often, while other people think that they were spread out enough to where it just adds to the world building and works pretty well. And I'm gonna be honest here, I fall into both categories. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. On one hand, I did feel like the references could get to be a little much, like they were just saying names for the sake of saying names. But on the other hand, it did feel like genuine world building. Like, just casually mentioning Styx the Badger like she's a close friend and everybody should know that by now. That feels pretty good. And some of them are so offhanded, like just saying Tangle would love climbing around a bunch of the ruins, that's nice. But then ones where it's like, man, I wish Shadow was here to help me. Like, no dip, call him. But yeah, all in all, the references I don't mind too much. Other than that, I think that's all I really gotta say about the story. I loved the story and I loved how closely it resembled Sonic Unleashed. But the next category is probably one that you wouldn't want to resemble Unleashed. I think everybody's heard the meme by now.
Werehog bad, Devil May Cry, God of War ripoff bad.
Yeah, we get it. But I'm here to tell ya, this is one of the few times where there aren't too many comparisons, at least in base gameplay. In fact, there are only a few comparisons I can think of at all. The first off being the boost, one of Sonic's main staples at this point. Of course, Sonic Unleashed didn't come up with the boost. That honor would go to Sonic Rush, and to an extent even the Sonic Advance series for coming up with the boost state. However, Sonic Unleashed is the one that came up with the boost in 3D. It was the first mainline 3D Sonic game to have the boost in the first place, and Sonic Frontiers chose to revolutionize the boost again. This time, instead of giving you a boost meter, you now have a stamina wheel, which, yeah, that's another thing that people use to compare it to Breath of the Wild, and honestly, it's justified. But here, instead of blasting off at the speed of sound at a moment's notice, the boost acts kind of like an assist to Sonic's already growing speed. That's not to say there's momentum quite like there is in the classic games or even fan games, but there is indeed momentum in this game, and so the boost acts complementary to that, and I think it works pretty well. Not perfectly all the time, but it is pretty good. And along with the normal boost, there's also something called the blue boost. At least I think that's what it's still called. Editor me, if it's not called that anymore, fix it.
Now.
Honestly, the blue boost isn't too much different. All it really does is make you go slightly faster than you normally would, and it has a cool lightning effect that was clearly inspired from the movies. Pretty much exactly the same though. Along with that innovation, there's also the fighting. Yes, combat in another mainline Sonic game. However, this combat actually works. It doesn't have some stupid mechanic tacked on for no reason. Here it actually feels like an expansion of Sonic's abilities, and it works nicely. I will say it doesn't get too in-depth. I mean, this is still a kid's game. They have to find a way for them to figure it out somehow. But it's still deep enough to where it feels like you're actually doing damage. It feels nice to pull combos off. It does start off pretty slow. I mean, you literally know nothing when this game starts. You can do basic punches and kicks, but that's really all you got. It's only when you level up that you get new combos and abilities. And that's another thing. Sonic Unleashed, at least to my knowledge, is the only other mainline Sonic game to have XP where you can upgrade. I'm not counting side games like Sonic Battle or anything like that. Only mainline 3D stuff here. In Sonic Unleashed, it works a bit differently. In that game, you collect XP things throughout the level, and then at the end of the level, you get to choose whether you spend it on the Werehog or the hedgehog. For normal Sonic, you can only upgrade how fast he goes in his ring gauge, but for the Werehog, you get an entire thesaurus. Yeah, you can literally upgrade almost everything about the Werehog here. His shield, his strength, his combos, he gets it all. And it's kind of the same with the Werehog here, honestly. For the Werehog, before you level up, you really don't have many attacks, and so it can feel really repetitive. And looking back at some of the older reviews, I think I might have connected the dots as to why people didn't really like the combat. I can imagine a lot of people not really spending the XP in this game, and then because of that, the combat would have felt extremely lame. I mean, I'm not saying the combat is actually deep or anything, but I think it's certainly better than what some people make it out to be. For Sonic Frontiers, it's basically the same. You collect XP through levels and all that, and then when you have enough points, you can open up the skill tree and get new moves. There are 3 moves that are story specific and you can't use them until you unlock them in the story. But other than that, yeah, all these moves are free game. You collect the XP, they're yours. However, for this game, I did feel like it was a bit out of place. I'm not saying it doesn't work, I'm just saying I wasn't used to it. See, Sonic Unleashed, they put the upgrades at the end of the level, so as soon as the level's done, you can be like, oh, I have points, might as well spend them. But for this, I forgot there was even a skill tree half the time. So I'd either have a bunch of points I just hadn't spent, or I'll be far in the story but be completely underleveled, or just not have moves, just because I'm not used to that being in a Sonic game. It really is a bag of mixed feelings, but all in all, I did feel like it worked. But that's just the combat. How did the rest of the game play? So, before I turned on Sonic Frontiers for the first time, the very first thing I did was turn on Sonic Forces. That was the last mainline 3D Sonic game, and so logically in my mind, I wanted to see how they would progress the controls. How would Sonic feel now? Would he be smoother? Would he control better? As some of you might know, in the past few mainline Sonic games, Sonic has become more and more stiff. He now almost had no momentum and stopped on a dime immediately. Not only that, but Forces especially just became a boost to win game. Just hold down the button and then there you go, you win. Also, his jumps just feel heavy, especially that weak thing that they call a double jump. He definitely doesn't feel like the most agile or fastest thing alive. So before I even turned on the new game, I wanted to have a refresher and played the first few levels of Sonic Forces. However, I'm not comparing it to Forces, I'm comparing it to Unleashed. And while some of those problems still persist in Unleashed, it was definitely better back then. While still being pretty stiff at times, Sonic is not nearly as immobile as he is in Forces. Also, there's just no double jump in this game, so you don't even have to worry about that. However, I would say instead of being stiff as the problem, Sonic and Unleashed is just clunky. I mean, the Werehog was kind of designed with this in mind, so he gets a pass, but modern Sonic in this game is just clunky. He does not move well in 3D at all, and that's kind of a bummer because I do like walking around the hub worlds here. Even when he's boosting, doing things like drifting just doesn't work out all the time. Like, they did not make the drift sharp enough at all. So let's say you're running through Savannah Citadel and then you get to one of those weird ramp things. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, that drift ain't working, you're flying off. If you don't slow down, you're dead. While this game did have a lot of polish on it, which is something that most modern Sonic games like this can't say that they have, I do think this mechanic needed a little more time in the Werehog oven. And that's basically all I can really say about the movement of Sonic in Sonic Unleashed. Definitely not the best I've ever played, but it's certainly not as bad as newer modern games would become. So what about Frontiers? How does he control there? Well, I don't mean this in a bad way, but he really doesn't control much different. He still can pretty much stop on a dime with no problem. And while that does feel a little strange for a game like this, I think for the world design it works. Especially with something like the boost, landing and being able to immediately stop so you don't go careening over a ledge is pretty nice. Other than that, there's not too much else to say. Sonic's normal jump goes high enough, and I think his double jump actually works pretty decently. I did forget, but while normal Sonic in Sonic Unleashed does not have a double jump, Werehog Sonic does, and I gotta say, that's about as pitiful as it is in normal modern Sonic games. In Sonic Lost World and Forces especially, that double jump is hot garbage. And yeah, it's basically the same for Unleashed. The Werehog's double jump will get you nowhere. But in Sonic Frontiers, I found that the double jump actually carries height and distance. I was really not expecting that, so that was a nice bonus. The only other thing I can really think of to talk about is the stiffness. Is Sonic stiff in Frontiers? Well, I mean, to an extent. I'd say he's definitely not fluid like he is in the adventure games, but he's also not nearly as bad as he is in Forces. He still feels like he has a range of motion, so definitely a step up. So hey, as long as we stay positive, what could go wrong? I say as a Sonic fan with years of experience. Oh yeah, there is one more thing that doesn't really count as an actual control scheme, but it is still cool that we have remnants of it. So I mentioned the drift in Sonic Unleashed before, and yeah, that carries over into Frontiers. You might be wondering, how? I never found a drift when I was playing Sonic Frontiers, so that's gotta be bullcrap. Well, I mean, it kind of is, just hear me out. So the drift originally was planned to be in Frontiers, and they did develop it for a good while, but apparently because they couldn't make it look convincing, they ended up scrapping it. However, it's not completely gone, because it's still in the Supersonic boss fights. Yeah, for some reason you can drift in the Supersonic boss fights, where Sonic isn't even touching the ground. A little bit interesting, but okay. Hey, it's a cool Easter egg, I'll take it. Anyway, yeah, that pretty much sums up all the controls I really want to talk about. Now there's only one more section I can think of to cover, and I'm pretty sure all of you can tell which one it's gonna be. So let's get Unleashed out of the way first. I absolutely love Sonic Unleashed soundtrack. Practically every song in this game hits the sweet spot. It's just a good soundtrack. There's like nothing else I can say. Whether I'm just chilling in Spagonia or running through Windmill Isle, it does not matter. This game has a killer soundtrack, and it continues all the way through. There is not one song I do not like, at least a little bit. Some songs I definitely prefer more than others. I will say the Egyptian Homeworld just kind of got annoying after a little bit, but I mean, that's one small instance out of an entire game soundtrack. That is a monumental feat. I'm still seeing people to this day get shocked about how good Sonic soundtracks sound, and I'm like, bro, they've been good since the beginning. Go back to the Genesis games and listen to how good those sound. But I'm sure you've heard all that before. I don't think you need me to tell you that Sonic Unleashed soundtrack is probably one of the best in the series. So how does Sonic Frontiers stack up against that legacy? Have you been online recently? I'm not gonna say it beats Unleashed by any stretch. I think Unleashed had mostly good songs, whereas Sonic Frontiers, there were definitely a few that I don't like. Like some of them I feel like were either rushed or just didn't. Stop! But for the most part, cyberspace levels have great music. I'd say my favorite cyberspace track is probably Flowing, but I don't know. There are still others I like, but definitely a few that I could have lived without. As for the overworld, I mean, it sounds really good. I like it. It sounds nice, but it did feel like they were just kind of trying to hit that Zelda mystical vibe that they were going for. And I mean, yeah, they hit it, but I don't think it fits a Sonic game very well. I'm sorry if you disagree, but as somebody who's played Sonic for a long time, this just didn't really feel like anything else that the series has put out. And again, yeah, that makes sense. It's not the tone they were going for. I don't think a fast-paced song would really fit this hub world. But I mean, again, if you're running through this giant field at the speed of sound, I don't think a calm piano piece is gonna really fit the theme either. It's a tough boat, but all in all, I'd say it's good. Not the best, but good. Now, it's time to talk about the giant Eggman in the room.
The boss fights.
Moya Otani, what were you on? This dude went insane. Helen Quinn, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, had some of the best vocals I've ever heard in a Sonic boss fight. And I'm not lying, it actually sounds that good. If you haven't played this game or heard the soundtrack yet, I'd encourage you to wait until you play the game, because the moment you jump into a boss fight and hear it for the first time, you will be left speechless. My favorite by far is still Undefeatable. I don't care if that's considered a common opinion, that's just how I feel. It sounds that good. Breaking through it all though is a close second. Even on just these songs alone, I'd buy the game, hands down. That's all I can say. If you haven't played the game, go play it. Listen to this OST.
Just do it.
End of story. As I said before, yeah, this game doesn't even come close to Sonic Unleashed soundtrack, but it's still really good, and it's a huge step up from Sonic Forces. I didn't even mention the lo-fi music that plays when you fish with Big, mainly because I'm not a lo-fi person, but I mean, yeah, it sounds nice. That's pretty much all I can say. Just go listen to the soundtrack yourself, or better yet, play the game and experience it. Because I'll tell you right now, I have listened to Undefeatable, Vandalize, and Break Through It All probably more times than any human should, and they still hit. It's just that good. Don't believe me? Go try it out. Even in things like the credits, they hit with an absolute banger. It's truly amazing how hard the team went. And if you just take a closer look at the lyrics, you see why. The team knew that this was a do-or-die situation. If Sonic Frontiers didn't succeed, then it is a very big possibility that we'd never see a quality Sonic game ever again. As long as Sega's making money, let's be real, they really don't care. And Sonic Team knew this. They put their heart into every aspect of this game. And if anything says that, it's the final song in this game. It was said that this is a message from Sonic Team, and it shows. They're done playing around. They've said stuff like that before, but after seeing what they put out, I think I'm willing to believe them, at least for now. They still need to keep proving themselves, especially with all the blunders they've had in the past. But from 2022 alone, they really are cutting out all the crap and fixing everything they've done. That is a message from Sonic Team. They're planning to do better. They are planning to keep improving. And I think incorporating a message like that into a soundtrack for a video game, like Sonic the freaking Blue Rat Hedgehog, is just so sweet, and it shows they're really trying. This team cares, and that means a lot, especially with some games coming out nowadays. So, to every single person involved with this soundtrack, I just want to say, thank you. You really helped make this game special. And not only that, but you helped revitalize my faith in this series. So please, keep making stuff like this. No matter what, we're not at the end. Somehow this blue rat will survive. Even if he makes another huge mistake, even if another 06 happens to show up, he's not going down. Granted, if another 06 did show up, I'm not sure he could survive, at least in video game form. But no matter what, the memory of this stupid Cyclops isn't gonna die. The team here knows they have something special, and it's time that it was treated that way. So again, thank you.
We're only at the beginning of this one-way dream.
Well, with all the main aspects of the game covered, what else is there to talk about? Oh, don't you worry, there's still plenty. But not for this video. In this video, I just wanted to talk about all the main aspects and give my own personal take on it. However, all you little smart Alex out there might notice, I was pretty vague, especially with the story. I didn't really cover it a lot. Sure, I did say going into this that I did think that most people knew the story by now, but what if you did want me to cover this more in detail? Well, believe it or not, I kinda left it vague on purpose. Or you can just blame my bad scripting, that's fine too. I don't want my opinion to change what you think. And that's not because I didn't want to talk about it, but it's because I want you all to be able to picture things the way I did. I want you to be able to go through Sonic Frontiers and picture the similar instances in Sonic's past. Is Sonic finally coming back to his roots, or is he straying farther away from them? Many people blasted through this game on their first try, and most likely haven't touched it since. Yeah, there's a lot of people that also just grinded this game to crap, learning every single thing about the game, including glitches. But many people just kinda went through the game and said, yeah, it was good, and then dropped it. But what if you went through the game slowly? Yeah, I know it's a Sonic game, that's crazy. But I don't mean play slowly. I mean experience it slowly. Take everything in. Compare the past with what it is now. See the growth. See the improvement. There are many parts of this game that I just didn't get to talk about. I could have, but again, I wanted my video to be a little bit different. So yeah, I left the story and gameplay vague. I didn't spare anything on the soundtrack though, you really should listen to it. Or play the game like I said. But a game like this, a game that had so much effort put into it, this game deserves to be experienced slowly. So if you haven't, go through the game again. Pay attention to the smaller things, and you just might find something you didn't notice before. You might not be the kind of person to go through a game a second time even slower than you did the first time. And that's fine. I'm like that with some other games. But for Sonic Frontiers, if you're a massive Sonic fan, do it. I promise you won't be disappointed. So, I guess the only question is, what's next? Well, even though 2022 was probably the biggest year Sonic's gonna have for a long while, he's not done yet. We're also getting Frontiers DLC. If you've been paying attention to any Sonic social media, then you've most likely been hyped up for this. I mean, new playable characters? What, are we gonna be able to play as Amy, Knuckles, and Tails? When was the last time that happened? And then in the Sonic fanbase, as I mentioned in the last video with how creative they are, Sonic Frontiers mods are all over the place. I mean, if you wanted to play as Shadow, hey, there he is. You wanted even more momentum? Well, there you go. It goes just from model swaps to full-on inversions of how the game plays. So if you can, I'd also recommend modding the game, just for fun. Why not? And looking even farther in the future, next year, the next Sonic movie is gonna come out. How big do you think that hype is gonna be? But whatever the case, as I said before, Sonic's not going anywhere. He survived this long, and with all the hype driving him, there ain't no way he's dying. I guess you could say we're on new frontiers.